morning, Monday morning here in Sydney. I haven't been live in a few days, and I thought I should just go live, not think about it. It's been the weekend, and life and this and that. And so I thought I should just go live without thinking about it too much. So that's what I've just done, just gone live. I'm dressed in my gym clothes because I'm going to go, my nieces are going to give me a personal training session to keep this body in shape, as best it can. Why am I dressing in front of you? That's not part of the plan. So that's what's happening here. Gonna just tidying up my studio because it's a bit cluttered. I'll give you a quick walkthrough. Been tidying it for the last 20 minutes or so it's looking a little better. Just scan around. All right. Chair looking really messy. I mean, OJ just does not keep his workspace in good condition. Bookcase, portrait of Ernie, various tripods, various piles of paper that should get looked at sometime. Here we have various projects to do with measurement, and as you can see, none of them are actually anywhere near completion, but I'm trying to contain them on this white square so they don't spread into the rest of the studio, and so that I notice them every day, and in the hope that an idea will snag, and I have started working on some of them, but they require some sort of, you have to be good at drilling and things like that, and fine motor skills with machines. So I haven't quite got to those yet. The wall of the studio, some projects that were really interesting and I'm not prepared to abandon yet. So they're sort of hanging on pieces of wire. Even the wire, it interests me no end because it forms part of, I've used them in my work before, and actually they remind me of nerves. So I like to think of things in the studio connected to other things in the studio via this complex nervous system, which is built of wire and metal bits that stick out and connect things. So there's this kind of almost like a network going on in the studio. You can see it. Oh, let's just keep the scanning going. You can see I was involved in a sewing project this weekend. I think I mentioned that. I'm pretty sure. Let's not be coy. I was quite involved. I'll show you the fruits of that labor. But suddenly let's talk about this wire for a second. You can see that there's a lot of wiriness about the studio. And I do see these things as connected, things that's being connected by a complex web of nerves, some unseen, some seen. And I think that is what I'm pushing towards with not being able to throw away these bits of wire, wanting to hang on to them. Not those bits of wire, that's just clutter. But there's the books that influence me, Gödel, Bach, various things in process. My lab coat, my drawn lab coat, where Sid Sledge is the scientist. You've seen that drawing, various works completed. And here we come to one of the main work areas. And so just a quick scan of that. This is the project I was working on last week, and I got quite consumed by it for a couple of days. Remember, I was talking about wounds. The idea of wounds became quite prominent, or is still prominent, until it becomes not prominent. And what I did was I took paper that had been, paper much like this paper, which had been essentially molded and edited and cut and sculpted by my machine in its rather violent, chaotic way of working. And I took that, and it was essentially a wound, and I talked about the idea of a wound being a part of our creative process. And here I've taken that, I've extended that idea. I've taken the paper, ripped it even further by my own hands. So now I'm taking what the machine has done, and I'm ripping it with my hands. So I talk about myself being inspired by the machine and essentially stealing the machine's work, which the machine is me. So it's kind of okay in some kind of way. So taking that and then ripping it and sewing it together and ripping and sewing and ripping and sewing. And what became really interesting, I'll turn it round as well, because the logic extends to the back, is how anything, any phenomenon acquires its own logic at a certain point, its own rules, its own the system. So we impose rules. We try and look at a system and we discover some of the regularities, some of the patterns in it, and then we also divide. So by this process, rules emerged, or not rules so much as a certain logic that it had in terms of how to turn it into something, for it to become something, or what is the logic of how we sew together the wounds of this particular system. And if you look carefully, you can see how there's a continuation of some of these ideas. So it's pieced together in almost like what I think of it as a map of sorts, a wound map, you could call it, where the boundaries. So this opens up a whole new areas of thinking, and areas that I know are interesting to me, like the one thing, the borders between two things, right? The boundaries between two things. So we start with one thing, it becomes two things. Does it become two things? In what way does it become two things? Does it become two things because two things are brought together, or because one thing split up into two? And how are those two things how are they connected to each other? How do they continue coexisting? And how do they become one thing? How coexist, as two things? So these are things that I know have been of real interest to me, and it's like the things that you're really interested in, you never can escape from, no matter what you're doing. So I didn't think that I was going to encounter ideas of seams, the idea of how things are held together that have been separated. That, from a Gestalt point of view, must be something inside me that is really, what was separated from me, what was rent apart, what in the world has been pulled apart that wants to get back together again, be held together. What are the tenuous links that hold this together? What is it in my life or in the life that I'm picking up through some ancestral or archetypal convergence or emergence of feeling that keeps coming up in my work? I don't know. I don't know. Only in that I don't have to know. All right, that's an important thing. Not knowing exactly what it is doesn't mean anything anyway. That is the pathway of exploration that is opening up in my work, and it keeps coming back to me, and it's that iterative phenomenon of continuing just to make things with my hands, to inquire in this kind of way, that brings those things manifests them into the world. So that was what's been consuming me. I noticed that I called the title of this morning's iteration, I called it Unhinged. I noticed that because I wrote it, so it's good that I noticed that. And I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but this idea, I should probably refer to it, given that I've called it the title, so I should refer to it. So I'm just tidying my studio, so I'm going to continue doing that while you stay right there. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say about Unhinged other than I'm seeing myself in my current iteration as unhinged. And what I mean by that is, so first of all, the word unhinged, a lot of my work, they appear to me, they come out and then I have to say, well, why is it? And it goes back to this thing that no words have meaning, words have value. And I'm starting to see words as the words we say as sacred. You know, nothing is said, they're not cheap things. You know, we don't just say words and then throw them away. They come out and they mean something. So this word unhinged has sort of come into my repertoire. And my feeling about it is that it's a kind of unmooring, which I think is at once scary, but at twice exhilarating, because I realize that is really what we have. When I say we, I'm talking about me, because I can only really refer to myself and see how it extends into the broader world as an idea or a concept. But I know that I'm to be the artist that I want to be, you know, requires an unhinging, you know, like removing myself from safety. And when I say safety, I mean, I am in the world a tremendously risk averse person. People who jump out of aeroplanes, I can't understand that. People who scuba dive, I just don't know why anyone would do such a thing. I'm generally getting better, but reasonably anxious out in the world. You know, like just going to unknown places fills me with some kind of trepidation. But in my work, I want to be unsafe. You know, because I'm from experience, just knowing that the further I am away from safety, the more interesting the work becomes. So my favorite example is 3 or 4 years ago, actually in 2017, end of 2017, I approached the CSIRO to do a residence where I said to them, and as an extremely naive statement, let me come into your space and build serendipity machines into your common area, and we'll do some performances. I'll work in a public context, and let's see what happens. The very idea being reasonably absurd, because one thing is I have made machines, but I'm no engineer, okay? And as a result, I call my machines quite eccentric, because they're clearly not made by an engineer. But that is what they are, and that is what I like about them. And it feels like, to some extent, that is what I am, or what we are. These, you know, it's funny how, like, Da Vinci had, or was it Da Vinci? Yeah, this, you know, Vitruvian man, this perfection, this idea of some perfect being that had been somehow in an idealized form brought into the existence and can be mathematically described as a sort of emanation from perfection. I have a completely different view of us, and you know, as almost cobbled together by the kind of whims of evolution. You know, really. And again, I'm referring to myself as this awkward thing in the world. Yes, kind of amazing if you really get down to the details of how it works. I mean, it is extraordinary, but at the same time, it's also kind of, you know, look at my hands and look at them going, and it's like, what is this object in the world? And it's kind of awkward. It's a bit eccentric. I mean, if you're going to design a really good machine, you're probably not going to make its hands do this the whole time when it's trying to explain something. And, you know, I mean, I don't know, all this kind of soft, wobbly stuff around the face and the skin, but I like it about it. You know, like, I like that about these you know, these bad machines, these poorly constructed machines that have been cobbled together. And my machines are like that. My machines are cobbled together by record players, by old umbrella bones, I call them, and bicycle wheels, things that I can recognize, things that have actually been quite well crafted in a factory. Actually, but I've taken them apart and I've repurposed them, and I've said to you, of course I love that if you take a record player and you make it do something else. I actually remember, this is one of my favorite stories, going to a very fancy record player shop, turntable shop, and trying to explain to the guy that I needed a belt because my record player was under some strain because it was trying to draw something. The proprietor of the shop was very concerned that anyone would dare take something like a record player. And look, I wouldn't do it to a fancy one, but like this, and make it do such heinous things that are not playing records. So anyway, point being, I'm no engineer, all right, and neither is the evolutionary process an engineer. It's working with what it has. It's so I take that kind of thing in my and really it's go to Cyro and I start building these machines. I'm in their common room, so I can't use power tools, or just as well I can't use power tools. And I'm building these machines there in public. So then I realized that gave me the inkling that performance is really an important thing in my work. I didn't realize at the time. I didn't think I was performing. I thought I was just making machines in their common area. Down the way, I realized, oh, that's actually performance. I'm performing, whatever that means. It means I'm doing something while being observed, which changes it completely, as I've alluded to. But the point being that when it came to actually performing, so I had these two machines. The one was called Sid's nervous system interacting with the scientist at Cyro. And actually that is where the idea of nerves, remember I pointed out these nerves in my studio, all these gangly wires that sort of are everywhere in my studio. The idea of art almost, or my work, being a externalization of nerves, kind of frisson, wiry, electric, exposed. That is really what you are if you're doing the work I'm doing, is feeling exposed, being exposed, and celebrating that disquiet. So I had these machines perform, and they performed badly as anticipated. Well, when I say anticipated, obviously I wasn't hoping that they'd perform badly. I was really hoping that they'd be spectacular. But what I was, the point being is that I wanted them to be, these serendipity machines should show the scientists at Cyro how the process of science works. There was almost a bit of arrogance in the work, I would say. So the machines did a performed badly, but in the process of performing badly, the scientists in the room got up from their chairs and they came up to the machine and they gently, it was a beautiful thing, I've got some video of it, very gently coaxed the machine into functionality. And really what it was doing was, it had a drawing arm. So by the machine's operation, it would make data, essentially, right? And it would be data of the machine, of showing the scientific process. But what happened was the scientists got involved and gently tried to attach the chain to the cog so that the whole thing would work. And there was a soft speaking as they discussed, well, maybe do this, maybe do that. I was just frantically running around trying to attach the pen to the reload, the ink cartridge, generally just kind of at some, not feeling, oh my God, what is going on over here? But what ended up happening was the machine, their gentle jostling was captured in the drawing. And that really was the point of the whole thing, is that I had what I thought was the outcome I wanted. But actually the real outcome was this collaboration between the scientist and the machine, the emergence of a system in that moment, and this emergence of a beautiful interaction with art and science, which I could never have contrived. I couldn't have contrived that. No way. It had to fail to succeed. And that was the beauty of it. That was the the so that after reflection, after coming away from that performance and realizing it took a while for it to sink in that was the point of it. Its failure was the point of it. And then that gently being coaxed back into something which it wasn't before was what the point of it was. And what it required, the one thing it really required was that being as far away from a comfortable place as is humanly possible, as it could be allowed, within reasonable limits. And in mathematical terms or physical descriptions, Ilya Prigogine would speak about systems having to be very far away from equilibrium in order for interesting things to emerge. Things operating at equilibrium don't really change. There's a stasis to some extent. Pull it far away from equilibrium, that gives opportunity for change. That is beautifully mathematically described in complexity theory, and we are described as systems operating quite far away from thermal equilibrium. We're not dead, in other words. So which is surprising if you consider the entropy and the phenomena, the entropy of the universe. Like the fact that we are here is just ridiculous. So we are a system operating. Life is a system operating far from equilibrium that really has no right to be here because it just doesn't make any sense from a physics point of view. So transiently we are here. We are here for life is kind of, and then probably just blips in and blips out. And while it's here, it better do some bloody work. But the point I'm making is we need to remove. These videos here are me trying to remove myself. Unhinged. Sorry, that's what we're talking about here. Back to the idea of unhinged. Is in order to discover what you're doing, you've got to, where possible, remove yourself from the safe moorings that you're in. The story of Abraham in the Genesis story always resonates with me here, because he was called to leave the safety of his father's house, the place of knowing, the place where he knew. So he knew there was comfortable. He knew what things were, how they operated relative to each other. And he was told to go into the wilderness, a place of not knowing. But there was an element of, yes, there's not knowing, but trust me. There's an element of trust in that not knowing. So that's the power. There's the not knowing, which is a terror, is a place of existential terror, of not knowing where. It's also an exhilarating place, because of the idea that yes, you don't know, but you must trust that. It's that idea of trust the not knowing. Be okay with not knowing. And that's the beauty of it. That's really where the magic lies. So that is why I've called this unhinged. And I've been describing to people, say I'm unhinged, and they look at me with, some look at me, it's interesting the reaction, some look at me like, deep, no, don't call it unhinged, call it disconnected, or call it something. Or somebody say, yes, unhinged, yes. So it's really fascinating, the two kinds of reactions to the idea of you being unhinged. And it brings out, I guess, the two extremes of being human, is the terror of not knowing, and then on the other side of not knowing is the exhilaration of the potential of knowing something new. So, I often say that in the work I do, I'm prepared to go through that kind of feeling, because the feeling of curiosity overwhelms my feeling of fear. Almost always is that, oh, this could fail horribly, but gee, I might discover something so incredible that I couldn't have known otherwise. So it's almost like these two forces are, there's fear and there's curiosity pulling at each other. And for me, curiosity is the thing that wins, because it's that potential of discovery which really excites me. All right, we've got 5 minutes left. I've run out of things to say, so I'm gonna carry on tidying the studio, and if something else occurs to me, I'll pop back in and say hello. But in the meantime, yeah, nice to see you this morning. Just details, it's about 7 o'clock on a Monday morning now, a reasonably chilly day in here in old Sydney town. I've got the heater on, and I'm tidying my studio because it needs a tidy. It's a small, confined space, and it gets overwhelmed quite quickly. So that's what I'm doing. Oh, I need to send this long story. Pencils, yeah. So I might just mutter off into the distance, and feel free to enjoy the muttering. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. I'll just hold this up. This is something that's been sitting on the floor of my studio for about probably more than a year, and it's not doing anything. It's just sitting there. And at a certain point, you have to decide, well, if it's just going to sit there and take up space and not provoke anything, maybe I need to send it packing. Maybe the back is more interesting. Is the back more interesting? I noticed this piece of wood holding it together, holding the top piece in place. I thought, that I'm finding more interesting than the front. All right, so maybe I need to just put it on the floor with the back facing out and see if that does something, because I want to throw it out. Actually, what I did at the beginning of this year was I did a major purge. I went into my cellar, I took out a lot of old work, and I smashed it. I took a wooden mallet, and I just took it apart, and it was a really interesting feeling of accepting that, you know, a lot of work is not good, and not a failure, because again, it's iterative. You know, you do a body, and then something pops out and says, oh, that's the thing that it's this idea again. It's that, what is the logic of the system that you're operating? It could be a painting, it could be anything. If it's unknown territory, you've got to wander into it, like Abraham's path into the unknown, and then you've got to find the logic of that system. You've got to find what is knowable about it, and through that, you've got to make a lot of messes along the way. You've got to. That's life, right? Okay, good. So that's what I can't remember why I mentioned that in the first place. But yeah, I don't remember. But that is how things work in my studio. Is they've got to present some kind of opportunity, for something to happen. Like these bits of paper here, I'm actually not ready to throw them out for some. Maybe because of the edginess of it, you know, like maybe they're not something yet. So that's what it is also. Like this over here, it's something, all right? Over there, it's not yet something, all right? It is something, but it's in the context of my studio and my work process, it's not yet something. These were something, got removed from that thing, and now they are something. They are not something yet. They're sort of in this in-betweenest place of possibility, okay? In the in-betweenest place of possibility. So weirdly, this would be rubbish in certain but here in this space, I'm not ready to throw that out. It's like it's asking me questions. It's provoking something in me. So it's going to have to find, and at some point the clutter gets overwhelming, and then I have to chuck it out. say, well, excuse, I can't anymore. It's making too much mess. But at the moment, it's asking me questions, all right? So when something is not realized as a form yet, it's got possibility. We look around the world and we see lots of objects that are realized. Toasters, you see there? Okay, I use the word toasters. And we know what those are. Can something that's realized become something else? That's my work to some extent. I see we've hit the 30-minute mark, so I'm going to stop now. Okay, great to see you all.